There is a statue standing in a forest in Oregon right now, tonight, while you are lying here. A triangle with one eye and a little top hat, its arm raised as if to shake your hand, sitting out in the moss and the rain since 2016, slowly going green. It is Bill Cipher. Not a drawing, not a prop on a shelf, an actual statue that the creator hid in the real world, and the final shot of the entire series is a camera pushing in on it. So Gravity Falls ended by pointing at a real place and saying, very softly, he is still out here. That is the sort of thing this series did constantly, and almost nobody says it out loud. This is Pine Hat, and tonight we are going through all of it. Every buried code and open thread and conspiracy the writers planted, and then never bothered to deny. So get comfortable, turn the lights down low, and if you haven't subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these. Let me start where the story started, because the strangest thing about Gravity Falls is that it told you the ending in its very first episode and dared you to notice. Every single episode closes the same way. The credits roll, and somewhere in that sequence there is a string of scrambled letters, a little block of nonsense that most people watching in 2012 would have skimmed right past on their way to the next thing. It looks like set dressing. It looks like the kind of decorative gibberish a cartoon puts on screen to feel mysterious without actually meaning anything. Except here, it always meant something. Every one of those blocks was a real, solvable code, and if you took the time to sit down with a pencil and work it out, it would talk back to you. That was the deal being offered from the start. Pay attention. Actually pay attention. And the credits will tell you things the episode itself never would. For the first 6 episodes, the method was a Caesar cipher, which is about the oldest trick in the book. You take each letter and shift it 3 places back through the alphabet, so an A becomes an X, a B becomes a Y, and onward. Simple enough that a determined 10-year-old could crack it, which was almost certainly the point, because the audience was full of determined 10-year-olds. And the detail that gets me is so easy to miss. The method was told to you out loud. If you played the opening theme and listened to the very end of it, there is a whispered, distorted voice buried under the music, and when you reverse that audio, it says 3 letters back. That is the key to the cipher. It is hidden inside the theme song, played backwards, from the first episode. Hirsch was handing you the decoder ring and betting you would not think to look. Now, if you did the work, if you took those first several credit sequences and shifted everything 3 letters back, you got little jokes. Mostly, bits of color, small confessions, a wink or two. But the theme song itself hides a page as well. In the intro, there is a shot of a journal page, and there is text on it, encoded in that same Caesar shift. And when you decode it, it reads, "Stan is not what he seems." That phrase would eventually become the title of an episode in the 2nd season, one that blows the entire premise wide open. So the single biggest twist in the series, the one the writers spent 2 years building toward, the one that recontextualizes every scene Grunkle Stan is in, was sitting right there in the opening credits of episode 1, in plain sight, spoiled from the beginning for anyone patient enough to read backwards. I find that astonishing as a piece of craft, because it means the mystery was never really hidden. It was encrypted, which is a different thing entirely. Nobody was lying to you. You were simply being dared to keep up. And that distinction, hidden versus encrypted, is the thread that runs through everything we are going to talk about tonight. A lie is something you deny. A code is something you leave lying on the table, in full view, trusting that most people will walk past it and a few people will stop. Gravity Falls almost never denied anything. It just made you earn it. When people say the show never bothered to deny its conspiracies, this is what they mean. The conspiracies were the text. They were printed at the bottom of the screen every week, and the assumption was that you would either decode them or you would not. And either way, the secrets stayed out in the open, where a denial would have felt like an insult. There is one more thing about that first cipher worth mentioning, because it tells you how seriously the people making this took the game. The whispered clue in the theme is not the only audio secret in the opening. There is a second hidden message elsewhere in the sound design, and the philosophy of the whole enterprise was that no corner of the frame and no second of the audio should go wasted. Empty space got filled with something you could solve, and the end credits cryptogram was never the only code in a given episode either. Extra messages were tucked into the episodes themselves, into signs and symbols and scraps of background text, so that the credits puzzle you had learned to expect was really just the one code the writers were willing to let you find easily. That is an enormous amount of extra work for a children's cartoon on a cable channel, work the overwhelming majority of viewers would never notice. they did it anyway. And once you know that, you cannot watch the same way again. Every background sign, every symbol on a wall, every flicker of text becomes a question. An entire generation of fans got trained to treat the screen as a puzzle, and the training started in the credits of episode 1, 3 letters back. What makes the cipher layer more than a gimmick is that it did not stay still. The Caesar shift only lasted for those first 6 episodes, and then the lock changed. From episode 7 onward, the credits switched to a different method entirely, an @bash cipher, which flips the alphabet on itself so that A becomes Z, B becomes Y, every letter mapping to its mirror on the far end. If you had learned to shift 3 letters back and you tried that on episode 7, you got nothing, just more nonsense. And you had to sit there and realize that the rules had moved. That is a deliberate act of teaching. The difficulty rose the way a game raises difficulty, level by level, trusting that the people who stayed were getting sharper as they went. Then it changed again. Around the middle of the first season, the credits moved to what is called a letter-to-number cipher, which is a bigger step because now the letters are not letters at all, they are numbers. A is 1, B is 2, all the way to Z is 26, and the code arrives as strings of numbers you have to convert back into words. And at the very end of the first season, something almost cruel and completely wonderful happened. For that final episode of season 1, all 3 methods were combined. A single message encoded first as numbers, then run through @bash, then through Caesar, stacked on top of one another, so that to read it, you had to peel back 3 separate layers in the right order, undoing everything the season had taught you all at once. It was a final exam, and I love that because it treats the audience as collaborators who have been in training for 20 weeks, not as passive viewers to be spoon-fed. For the entire second season, the method changed one last time to a keyed Vigenère cipher, which is a genuine jump in complexity. A Vigenère cipher does not shift every letter by the same amount. It uses a keyword, and the keyword changes the shift from letter to letter, which means that without the key you are essentially locked out, and even with the right approach, it is real work. Across 2 years, the audience got graduated from a puzzle a child could crack with a pencil to a cipher that, historically, took cryptographers centuries to reliably break. Over the course of 40 episodes, the credits of a Disney cartoon walked you through most of the history of classical cryptography, in order from the simplest substitution to the keyed polyalphabetic systems, and none of it was ever announced. The lock just kept moving, and you were trusted to find the new key. And the keys were hidden the same way the first one was, tucked into the episodes themselves. The reversed whisper in the opening changed to match. Where it first told you 3 letters back, when the credits moved to the mirror alphabet, the whisper changed accordingly, the reversed audio now telling you to switch A with Z, which is precisely the @bash rule, so you were always, in an oblique way, being told how to read things, as long as you were willing to run the sound backwards and listen to a hiss. That is a detail I find almost absurd in its generosity. A cartoon updating its own secret instructions to match a puzzle it never once admitted to setting. There is something almost tender in that. You were never left completely stranded. The answer was hidden, but it was always hidden somewhere findable. Gravity Falls wanted to be solved. It just wanted you to be worthy of the solution, and worthiness, here, meant paying attention when everyone around you had stopped. This is the foundation for everything else, so let me make the point plainly before we move on. The reason fans believe that every frame is loaded, that every symbol means something, that no throwaway detail is truly throwaway, is not paranoia. It is a completely rational response to how the series actually behaved. When a show spends 40 episodes proving to you that the gibberish at the bottom of the screen is always a real message, you would be a fool to assume the gibberish on the wall in the background is not. The Conspiracies start here, with a production that decided, from the very first week, that it would rather encode its secrets than hide them, and then held to that decision with a discipline bordering on obsessive. Everything else, the author, the demon, the apocalypse, the statue in the woods, sits on top of that foundation. You were taught to read it, now let me show you what it was trying to say. The first great mystery, the one the whole first season orbits, is the question of the journals. Very early on, Dipper finds a book in the woods, buried, its cover marked with a golden hand of 6 fingers and a number 3. Inside are diagrams and warnings and sketches of the creatures that live around the town, all in the handwriting of someone who clearly spent years out there documenting things no sane person would believe. The book is not finished. It refers to other journals, and every page is signed, or rather unsigned, because the author's name is never written. Wherever a signature should be, there is a blank, a redaction, a deliberate refusal. So you are handed this incredible object in the first episode, and the blank where the name should be becomes the central engine of the story. Who wrote this? Who knew all of this? Who was here before the family, mapping the impossible, and then vanished? The story could have coasted on that question for 2 seasons and answered it in a rush at the end. Instead, it left a trail, and the trail is a small masterpiece of the open but not denied storytelling we keep circling tonight. The clues are physical, findable, decodable. In one episode, the characters recover a laptop from a hidden bunker in the woods, and the laptop is locked, and the tiny scrap of information they pull off it is that the author's name begins with the letter F. That is all. One letter. And the fandom, which by this point had been trained for a year to treat every scrap as load-bearing, went to work on that F like it was a keyhole. In another episode, the one about the Society of the Blind Eye, the town's local eccentric, Old Man McGucket, is revealed to have been the author's assistant, a brilliant man who helped build the machines and then broke his own mind, trying to forget what he had seen. So now you know the author had a partner. You know the partner survived, you know the author did not, or at least is not around to say so. And still, no name. What is happening across all of this is teasing without cheating. It is a difficult balance, and I do not think people give it enough credit for how well it held. A mystery box show can very easily curdle, can pile up questions it has no intention of answering, can mistake withholding for depth. Gravity Falls kept its promises. Every clue dropped about the author was a real clue that pointed at a real answer. And when the answer came, it did not contradict a single thing that had gone before. The F was real. The 6 fingers on the golden hand were real. And they were not decoration, they were a physical trait, because the author had 6 fingers on each hand, an actual case of polydactyly that had been drawn into the very symbol on the cover from the first frame of that first journal. And the answer, when it finally arrives in the 2nd season, is that the author of the journals is a man named Stanford Pines, called Ford, and he is the identical twin brother of Grunkle Stan, which means that the entire time you have watched Stan run a cheap tourist trap and lie to tourists and count his money, there has been a second, hidden Pines, a genius, a scientist, a man who documented the deepest secrets of the town and then disappeared into them. There was a whole other main character you simply had not been shown yet. He was the blank on the page. He was the F. He was the 6 fingers. And the reason Stan is not what he seems, that phrase encoded in the opening credits of the very first episode, is that the man you have watched pretend to own the Mystery Shack has been keeping his own brother's identity and his own brother's terrible machine secret from everyone, including the 2 children living under his roof. The blank where the name should be was never empty. It was full of a person, and his hand had been on the cover of the book the whole time. So then the question becomes, what happened to Ford? And this is where the biggest secret turns out to have been sitting in the basement the entire time. Stan is not just hiding his brother's identity. He is hiding a machine. Underneath the Mystery Shack, behind a false wall, down an elevator, there is a vast interdimensional portal, and for 30 years, Stan has been secretly trying to make it work. That is the real business of his life. The tourist trap, the cheap magnets, the fake attractions, all of it has been a front, a way to earn the money and the cover he needs to keep the lights on down in that basement, where every night he has been inching a broken machine back toward life. This lands in an episode near the middle of the 2nd season, and it reframes the man completely. Every lie Stan tells, and he tells a great many, is in service of one enormous and secret loyalty. The backstory, once it is finally laid out, is a family tragedy told in miniature. Stan and Ford were born in a shabby town on the New Jersey coast, Glass Shard Beach, 2 brothers so close they were almost one person, and their shared dream as boys was to sail the world together on a boat they called the Stan-O-War. But Ford was gifted in a way Stan was not, a genuine scientific prodigy, and when a chance came for Ford to attend a prestigious school and leave the town behind, something broke. Stan, whether by accident or by a jealousy he could not quite name, damaged Ford's science project the night before it mattered most. Ford lost the opportunity, and their father, a hard and unforgiving man, threw Stan out of the house and told him not to come back until he had made himself worth something. So the twins who were going to sail the world together were split apart at the worst possible age, one carrying guilt and the other carrying resentment, and neither of them able to say the thing that would fix it. Ford went west, settled in Gravity Falls, discovered the impossible things the town is soaked in, and began to write the journals. Then he made the mistake that costs him everything, which we will come back to, and he built the portal, and the portal took him. In the moment it happened, he had already realized the machine was too dangerous to exist, and he gave Stan one of the journals and told him to take it to the far side of the earth and never let the three books be brought together again. The brothers fought, because of course they did. 30 years of hurt does not evaporate because one of them is in danger, and in the struggle, Ford was thrown into the portal and vanished. Not killed. That is one of the load-bearing rules of the whole story, and it matters. The portal did not destroy Ford, it displaced him, flung him out across a multiverse of other dimensions where he wandered, alive, for 3 decades, unable to get home. And so Stan, holding his brother's journal and his brother's guilt and the smoking ruin of his brother's machine, made a decision that is either the most loyal thing anyone does in the entire series or simply pure stubbornness, and probably both. He took Ford's name, he moved into Ford's life. He told the world that Stanford Pines still ran the Mystery Shack, and for 30 years he let everyone, including eventually his own great-niece and nephew, believe he was a small-time crook named Stan, when in fact he was a small-time crook impersonating his lost brother so he could keep the con going long enough to finish rebuilding the one device on Earth that might bring that brother back. He never told anyone. He never asked for help. He just went down into the basement, night after night after night, for 30 years, working on a machine he did not understand, driven by a debt he could never quite pay. And when the children finally see the portal roaring to life and demand to know what he is doing, the honest answer is that he is trying to undo the worst night of his life. Nobody ever denied that Stan was a liar. It just took 2 seasons to show you that the biggest lie was an act of love. Which brings us to the thing that took Ford in the first place, because he did not build that portal alone, and he did not build it out of his own imagination. He built it because something told him to. That something is a floating yellow triangle with one eye and a top hat, and a voice like a game show host having a stroke, and his name is Bill Cipher, and he is the closest thing this gentle summer cartoon has to a devil. I am not going to walk you through his entire tragic origin tonight, partly because we have spent a whole other evening on exactly that, but I do want to lay out what he actually is, because his nature is the key to reading every deal he ever makes, and Gravity Falls is very precise about it in a way most people never fully register. Bill is a 2-dimensional being, that is not a metaphor. He comes from a flat universe, a plane, a place the later material calls the second dimension, and he was born there over 1 trillion years ago, which is a length of time so absurd it stops meaning anything, which I think is rather the point. He was born able to see the third dimension, to perceive a direction none of his flat neighbors could even conceive of, and that gift, or that curse, led him to do something to his homeworld that destroyed it. On screen this stays vague, only the shape of it implied. The later book fills it in, and we will get to how much the books are allowed to fill in, but the essential fact is that Bill is a refugee from a dead dimension, a creature who broke his own world open and then fled into the unstable space between realities, a place of nightmares and half-formed things, where he became a demon that lives in dreams. And that word, dreams, is the load-bearing limitation on everything Bill does for most of the series. Here is the rule that Gravity Falls is absolutely rigorous about, and that fans sometimes forget when they imagine Bill as an all-powerful monster. In the normal waking world, he has no body. He cannot simply walk into town and start smashing things. He can only reach you through the mind, through dreams, through what the story calls the mindscape. And if he wants to act in the physical world, he has to make a deal with someone who does have a body and borrow theirs. He is a passenger. He needs a door, and the only doors are people who agree to open themselves to him. That is why his whole existence is built around deals. It is not a personality quirk. It is a physical necessity. Bill traffics in bargains because bargains are the only way a bodiless thing can touch a solid world. And the deals come with the strangest and most important rule of all. 1. The writers plant carefully, and the fandom treats almost like scripture, because it is the key to how dangerous he really is. Bill does not lie, or more precisely, he is never shown telling a flat, outright falsehood. Everything he says is technically true. He deceives through omission, through wordplay, through statements that are accurate in a way you will not understand until it is far too late. When he offers you a deal, the terms are real, and the catch is real, and he told you the catch. He just told it to you in a shape you could not read until the trap had already closed. This makes him far more frightening than a simple liar, because you cannot protect yourself by catching him in a lie. There is no lie to catch. He is the con man who only ever tells the truth, and uses the truth to ruin you. And once you understand that about him, you go back and watch every scene he is in, with a kind of dread, listening to the exact words, because here the exact words are the whole game, and the yellow triangle knows it better than anyone. Now, how Bill got to Ford in the first place is one of those threads deliberately underdrawn, and it is worth pausing on, because it is a good example of the series implying something enormous and then declining to spell it out, only for a book, years later, to walk up and confirm the thing everyone had already suspected. What you see on screen is that Ford, alone in Gravity Falls, brilliant and a little arrogant and desperate to be taken seriously after a lifetime of being called a freak for his 6 fingers, was contacted by a being who told him he was special, who told him he was the one mind capable of understanding the town's secrets, who became his muse and his partner and, in the fragments you get, something closer to the center of his life. Bill was the friend who finally believed Ford was a genius, and Ford, starved for exactly that, let him all the way in. Then the deal turned, as Bill's deals always do, and Ford realized too late that the muse had been using him to build a door between dimensions so that Bill and his kind could pour through. The friendship was the con, the belief was the bait. The outline is there, and you are trusted to feel the shape of the betrayal, but how deep it went is left unspoken. Because this is a children's cartoon airing in the afternoon, and there is only so much screen time. What was implied, the supplementary book published years later, made explicit, and the language is startling. Ford, in that later material, describes Bill as the center of his life, the sun in his galaxy. Bill, for his part, is shown to have kept pages that Ford tore out of his own journal, held onto them, the way you keep something from a person you cannot let go of. Fans had read all of this into the story for years, had argued that the Bill and Ford dynamic was written as something far more intimate and far more wounded than a simple scientist and his evil inspiration, and that the betrayal played less like a business deal gone wrong and more like a love affair that ended in ruin. And nobody in charge ever denied it. The theory was left with the fans, and then, much later, the book put its hand on the theory's shoulder and said, yes, that is what it was. I find this pattern fascinating because it is a different flavor of the conspiracy we keep circling tonight. With the ciphers, the secret was encoded and waiting to be solved. With Bill and Ford, the secret was emotional, and it was hidden not in a code but in restraint, in the things left unsaid, trusting the audience to read the temperature of a scene. And the audience did. That is the strange power of a mystery box built by people who respect the box. When you consistently reward close reading, your viewers start close reading everything, including the silences, including the way 2 characters look at each other. And they are usually right, because people who fill every credit sequence with hidden messages are not the sort who leave an emotional beat in a scene by accident. Nothing here is by accident. That is the whole thesis of the fandom, and the record keeps proving them correct. There is one more piece of Bill's nature worth naming, because it will matter enormously by the end of the night. For all his power, for all that he treats reality as a hologram and the universe as a joke, Bill is running from something. The trillion years, the destroyed homeworld, the flight into the space between dreams, all of it. And underneath the game show voice there is a being who did a terrible thing and could not live inside the guilt of it, and so rebuilt his whole personality around the idea that nothing matters, and rules are for suckers. The series implies this. The book confirms it, and it changes how you read his obsession with Gravity Falls, because a creature who tells you nothing matters, over and over, with that much energy, is not a creature at peace with the idea. He is a creature trying to convince himself. Hold on to that. It comes back around when we talk about how he ends. There is a conspiracy that runs in the opposite direction from all the others, and I love it precisely because it inverts everything we have been saying. Most of the secrets in Gravity Falls were planted on purpose and left for the audience to find. This one was found by the audience first, and the writers were more or less forced to admit it was real. It is the Zodiac wheel, sometimes called the cipher wheel, the ring of 10 symbols that becomes the key to defeating Bill in the final stretch of the series. If you have seen the finale, you know it. A circle of 10 little icons, a pine tree, a shooting star, a six-fingered hand, a pair of glasses, a question mark, a llama, a star, a heart, a crescent, a bag of ice, and the idea that when the 10 people those symbols represent join hands, they can stop the apocalypse. It arrives in the story as an ancient prophecy, something Ford says was passed down from the region's earliest people, a piece of deep lore that has apparently been waiting the whole time for this exact moment. Except it had not been waiting the whole time, at least not in the way it pretends. According to the creator, those 10 symbols did not begin life as a prophecy at all. They began as decoration. They were just recurring images, little motifs sprinkled into the backgrounds of the early episodes, because they looked good and felt cohesive, the visual vocabulary of the world. A pine tree here, a shooting star there, a question mark on a character's shirt. There was no grand plan that these were the 10 keys to salvation. They were set dressing, and the fandom, doing what this fandom always does, noticed that the symbols kept appearing, cataloged them, arranged them, and became convinced they meant something, because by now, they had been trained to assume that everything means something. They built the theory, and the theory was so good, so satisfying, so exactly the sort of thing this series would do, that the writers looked at it and, in effect, decided to make it true. The fan reading became the canon. The decoration became the prophecy, retroactively, because the audience willed it into significance. Now I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the kind of story that gets exaggerated in the retelling. The finale was always going to force the family and the town to unite against Bill, and the symbols were always associated with specific characters in a loose way, so it is not as if the wheel was invented from nothing at the last second. What the creator has said, and what makes this such a lovely piece of the show's history, is that the symbols started as motif, and the elaborate prophecy structure grew up around them, partly in response to how obsessively fans were reading them. The line between what the writers intended and what the fans discovered got truly blurry, and no one ever drew a hard line, because the blur was the point. In a story about the idea that meaning is hiding everywhere if you look hard enough, having the audience find meaning the writers had not fully planned, and then honoring that meaning, is almost the perfect outcome. Creator and fans were writing the mythology together. And I should flag, because we are being honest about our registers tonight, that a lot of the specific symbol to character assignments are firmer in the fandom than they ever were on screen. A few get tied down clearly. The pine tree is Dipper. It is on his hat from the first episode. The shooting star is Mabel. It is the sweater she wears constantly. The six-fingered hand is Ford, drawn straight from his polydactyly. The question mark is Seuss, off his shirt. But the exact mapping of the rest, which minor icon belongs to which townsperson, is partly interpretation that fans have settled on by consensus rather than anything confirmed out loud. And even the obvious-looking ones are argued over. The glasses, for instance, get read as Stan by some fans and as McGucket by others. And the wheel itself is drawn in a slightly different order in different episodes, so I would not stake much on any single assignment beyond those first few. I am not going to pretend the wheel is more precisely defined than it is. What matters, and what is true, is that the mechanism itself is real, the 10 united and holding hands, and that its origin is this beautiful accident where a cartoon's background decorations were promoted to sacred prophecy because the people watching refused to believe anything in it was just decoration. They were mostly wrong about that, and being wrong made them right. When Bill finally does break through, when the rift between dimensions tears open and the yellow triangle gets his physical form at last, the apocalypse that arrives is genuinely unsettling for a children's cartoon. The sky cracks. Bill grows a body and towers over the town. He turns the townsfolk to stone and stacks them into a throne. He throws a party for his fellow nightmare creatures, the ones he calls his hench-maniacs, monsters pulled out of the space between worlds. It is the end of everything, and none of it is softened much. But there is a rule governing the whole catastrophe, and it is one of the eeriest details in the entire series, stated almost in passing and then never dwelt on, which is exactly why it stays with you. The apocalypse cannot leave town. There is an invisible barrier at the edge of Gravity Falls, a wall around the whole valley, and Bill's power stops at it. His monsters slam into it and cannot pass. His weirdness, all of it, is confined to the town limits. Beyond that line, the world goes on completely normally. people driving to work, watching television, entirely unaware that a triangular demon has torn open reality and enthroned himself on a pile of petrified human beings a few miles up the road. And this drives Bill nearly insane with frustration, because he has conquered a town and he wants a world, and he cannot get out. He is a god in a snow globe. The apocalypse is real and total and also, from the outside, invisible. I find this one of the most quietly horrifying ideas the writers ever committed to, and it connects to a theme running underneath the entire series. The idea that the world is full of enormous, terrible, wonderful things that are being actively kept from you. The barrier is just the starkest version of a cover-up that has been described from the beginning. Gravity Falls is a place where the impossible happens constantly, and the rest of the world does not know, because the impossible is contained, quarantined, walled off, whether by an invisible dome during the apocalypse or by decades of deliberate suppression the rest of the time. Normalcy, we keep being told, is not the absence of weirdness. Normalcy is weirdness that somebody has successfully hidden, and there is something deeply strange in the thought that within this reality, the apocalypse happened and was survived and was undone, and the vast majority of people on the planet never had the faintest idea it occurred. It just got cleaned up and filed away with all the other secrets. There is a second front to the apocalypse that I will only touch on, because we have devoted a whole other evening to it. And that is what happens to Mabel while all this is going on. Bill, or rather the machinery of the apocalypse, traps her inside a bubble, a prison disguised as paradise, a fantasy world that gives her everything she has ever wanted, an endless summer where nothing changes and nobody grows up, and she never has to face the thing she is most afraid of, which is that the summer is ending and her childhood with it. And the crucial, easily missed point, the thing made very clear even as it is dressed in candy colors, is that this is a trap and not a reward. The danger is not that Mabel will be tortured. The danger is that she will be perfectly happy and never want to leave. Getting everything you want, the argument runs, is one of the surest prisons ever devised because you have no reason to try the door. It is a startlingly dark idea to put at the center of a bright children's show about a girl and her pig, and there is no flinching from it. And the detail that makes it land is the brother she builds for herself inside the fantasy. In the bubble world, Mabel conjures up a version of Dipper who never disagrees with her, an agreeable, empty imitation the fans took to calling Dippy Fresh, a boy who says yes to everything and grows up into nothing. He is exactly what she thinks she wants, and exactly the proof that the fantasy is poison. Because the real Dipper is the one who argues with her, who is starting to pull toward his own life, and a summer that removes all of that friction removes the actual person along with it. The pink bubble just sits there, gorgeous and suffocating, and you are trusted to understand that the nicest version of a lie is still a lie. And the part people forget is that the wheel is what they reach for first, and the wheel fails. The 10 are gathered, the circle is formed, everyone takes hands, the symbols line up exactly as the prophecy promised, and at the decisive moment Stan and Ford, of all people, start arguing, and the circle breaks. The one mechanism the whole story built toward, the ancient key to defeating Bill, collapses because two brothers still cannot stand next to each other without picking a fight. Bill scatters them in an instant, and the prophecy is spent. So the unity that was supposed to be the answer becomes, at the moment it matters most, the exact place the plan snaps, and everything that follows has to be improvised out of the wreckage of it. I love that the writers let their own prophecy fail. It would have been so easy to let the wheel work, and instead, the sacred mechanism is undone by an ordinary family grudge, which is far truer to what this story is actually about. So how do you kill a demon who cannot be lied to, who twists every deal, who only tells the truth, once the prophecy you were counting on has already come apart? The answer the finale lands on is one of the most satisfying pieces of plotting in the whole series, and it works precisely because of everything already established about who these people are. The plan begins with Ford. Ford, who knows Bill better than anyone, offers himself as the trap. The idea is to lure Bill into Ford's mind, and once the demon is inside, McGucket fires the memory gun and erases Ford completely, wiping out Bill along with him. It is a suicide plan, or near enough. Ford is prepared to sacrifice his own mind, 30 years of memory, everything he is, to take the triangle down with him. And Bill, who has spent the entire series trying to break into Ford's mind, cannot resist the bait. But here is where 2 full seasons of character work get cashed in a single gesture. Stan and Ford, The twins, the two men who spent a lifetime unable to say the right thing to each other, secretly switch clothes. Bill, expecting to enter the mind of his brilliant enemy Ford, walks instead into the mind of Stan, the con man, the brother everyone underestimated, the one whose entire life has been about wearing another man's identity. And Bill does not notice, because to a creature obsessed with genius, Stan's mind reads as unimportant beneath attention. He steps into what he thinks is the smart twin and finds himself locked inside the head of the con man who has been playing dumb his whole life. And that is the last mistake Bill Cipher ever makes. Once the demon is trapped inside Stan's mind, weakened, cut off, Stan lets McGucket fire the gun. He erases his own mind on purpose to destroy the thing living in it. And then, as Bill flickers and screams and comes apart, Stan punches him to pieces. The smartest being in the multiverse, undone by a fist, in the head of the brother nobody thought was worth possessing. I think this is one of the single most emotionally perfect endings in any animated show, and the reason is that it makes Stan's entire life the weapon. Every year he spent being the disappointing twin, the failure, the crook, the man impersonating his better brother, all of it becomes the exact thing that saves the world, because Bill's contempt for Stan is the blind spot that kills him. The demon who could read everyone could not read the man who had spent 30 years being unreadable, and it costs Stan everything. He does not die, but he loses himself, his whole memory gone, sitting there afterward not knowing who his family is, not knowing his own name, an empty man in a chair. And this is where one of the load-bearing rules matters most, the rule about the memory gun, because the gun does not actually destroy a person. It erases the memories, but the self underneath is still there, and memories, in this universe, can be rebuilt from the outside. We saw it earlier with McGucket, whose erased past could be physically recovered because the memories were stored, not annihilated. So when the family sits with Stan afterward and shows him a scrapbook, photographs, the small physical record of a shared summer, something in him begins to answer. He recognizes the pig. He recognizes Seuss. Piece by piece, from the cues around him, Stan comes back. It is presented almost as a miracle, and some people find it a little too convenient, and I understand that. But it is consistent with a rule set down episodes earlier, that a wiped mind here is a locked room, not a demolished one, and the key is held by the people who love you and remember you when you cannot remember yourself. The man erased himself to save the world, and the world he saved put him back together. I do not think this series ever did anything more purely itself than that. But Bill, what actually happened to Bill? This is the conspiracy most conspicuously left undenied, and it is the one that has kept the fandom arguing for years. On screen, in the finale, he appears to be destroyed. He comes apart inside Stan's mind, screaming, and as he goes, his form distorts and his voice warps into a garbled mess of noise. And this being Gravity Falls, of course the garbled noise is not just a sound effect, it is a message. If you slow it down and reverse it, the way fans learned to reverse the whisper in the theme song, his dying words decode into a specific, chilling sentence. He calls out a name, Axolotl, and then he says, "My time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. That I may return." His last act, as he is being erased, is to cast something like a spell, to call on a power older than himself and ask to come back. A resurrection clause was hidden in the villain's death rattle, played backwards, dropped into a children's cartoon, and almost the entire audience watched him die without ever hearing what he actually said. So who or what is the axolotl? In the deeper lore, mostly through the journals and the supplementary material, the axolotl is a god, an entity that exists outside of space and time, named after the strange little Mexican salamander that famously can regenerate its own limbs, which is not a coincidence, because regeneration and rebirth are the entire idea. There is a poem, an incantation tied to this creature, and it speaks about Bill possibly returning in a different form, a different time. So the lore planted a mechanism by which his end might not be an end at all, but a transformation, a delayed return. And then it declined, absolutely and on purpose, to tell you whether that return ever comes. The creator has been open about this. He has called it a lingering thread, something left deliberately unresolved, a door left standing open so the fans could keep the fire going. It was not a mistake or an oversight. It was a choice to end the villain on a question mark instead of a period. Then, years later, the book arrived and answered part of it, though not in the way anyone expected. The supplementary book, published in 2024, is framed as being written by Bill himself after the finale, and what it reveals is that he was not annihilated. The axolotl, the god he called out to, spared him. He was not sent into oblivion. He was sent to a place, an interdimensional facility the book calls the Theraprism, which is essentially a mental hospital for cosmic entities, where the intended arc for him is not punishment exactly, but rehabilitation, the slow, humiliating, therapeutic process of a trillion-year-old demon being made to sit with what he did, with the goal, eventually, of reincarnating him as some smaller, humbler form of life. So the answer to is, Bill Dead is a genuine and strange no. He is not free, he found no loophole out of this one, and that itself is significant, because his whole existence was built on finding the loophole in every deal, and the god who caught him made a bargain even he could not wriggle out of. But he has not gone either. He is somewhere, contained, doing arts and crafts in a cosmic asylum, and the last shot of the series, that statue in the Oregon woods, is his abandoned physical shell, left behind in our world, going green under the rain. This is the purest example of the whole pattern, and I want to land on it clearly. Nobody ever denied that Bill might return. His return request was encoded in his death, backwards, and left for the fans to decode, argue about, build a decade of theories on, and only years later did a book step in and say, here is what the encoded plea actually led to, and even then the door was left open a crack. Because the endpoint of rehabilitation is reincarnation, and reincarnation is just another word for coming back. The most dangerous being in the story ends not with a definite death, but with a maybe. A maybe planted so carefully and defended so completely that you almost have to admire the nerve of it. Bill Cipher's last word was return, and nobody in charge has ever been willing to tell you, flatly, that he will not. Which brings us all the way back to that statue. Because the statue is where the obsession with hidden meaning stopped being a thing on the screen and walked out into the real world. In the summer after the finale aired, the creator launched a real event, an alternate reality game, a treasure hunt that fans came to call the Cipher Hunt. The premise was simple and completely in keeping with everything the audience had been trained to do. Somewhere out there in the physical world, the actual Bill Cipher statue existed, the same one glimpsed in the final shot of the series, and if fans could decode a trail of clues scattered across the globe, they could find it. Not a picture of it, not a replica, the genuine object. The statue is a real, physical thing that a professional prop fabricator built out of plexiglass and then deliberately aged, weathered, seeded with moss, so it would look like it had been sitting in the forest for years. It was installed, for real, in a wooded area near a small town in Oregon, and filmed there for the post-credits shot of the finale. So the last image of the series is documentary footage. It is a real camera in a real forest, pointing at a real statue that is still, as far as anyone knows, standing there. When I told you at the start of tonight that Bill is still out in the woods, I was not being poetic, I was being literal. There is an object. The hunt to find it was enormous. It began, of all places, in St. Petersburg, Russia, where the first clue was hidden, and it spidered out across the world, from country to country, as fans decoded ciphers, followed coordinates, visited locations, and pieced together the trail. It ran for about 2 weeks in the summer of 2016, and it ended in that Oregon forest, when a group of fans finally reached the clearing and found the triangle waiting for them among the trees. And this is the part that says everything about this fandom. The creator expected it to take much longer. He built a hunt he thought would run for a good while, and the fans tore through it in roughly 2 weeks, faster than he had planned for, because by this point they were not amateurs. They had been decoding for 4 years. They had graduated from 3 letters back all the way to a keyed Visionaire and out the other side into a global scavenger hunt, and they solved it like professionals, because in a sense they were. Waiting at the end, with the statue, was a chest, and what was inside it is such a perfect grace note that I have to tell you about it. There was a plastic crown and a sash naming the finder the mayor of Gravity Falls. There was a small Bill statue, a music box that played the theme, a custom-made copy of the third journal, and a little drive with a recorded message on it from Grunkle Stan himself. So the reward for cracking a 4-year planet-spanning puzzle was not money. It was a handful of props and a joke, and a voice from the story saying, in effect, "Well done, you found us." And I think that is the whole relationship between this series and its audience distilled into one buried treasure chest. 4 years were spent hiding things, and the fans were trusted to find them. And when they found the last and most tangible thing, the reward was simply the confirmation that the game had been real all along, that the searching had meant something, that the person on the other side of the screen had been putting these things there on purpose, for them, hoping they would come. There is a warmth in that which I find almost unbearable, honestly. It is a creator and an audience meeting in a forest at the end of a story, both of them a little amazed the other one showed up. Now let me back up and ask a question the series sits on for almost its entire run without answering directly, which is simply, why? Why is Gravity Falls like this at all? Why is this one particular valley in Oregon so soaked in the impossible that a man could spend a lifetime cataloging its monsters and never run out? Most of the time this is treated as a given, the premise you accept in the first episode and stop questioning, the way you accept that a cartoon town has whatever it needs to have. But an answer does eventually arrive, and it is buried, in the plainest sense, because it is under the ground. Beneath Gravity Falls there is a spacecraft, an enormous alien craft crashed and buried in the earth that came down an almost unimaginably long time ago, tens of millions of years before there were any people to see it, and the impact is part of why the land around the town has the shape it does, the strange cliffs and the odd geography. The pilots died in the crash, and the deeper lore gives them one of the driest jokes in the whole canon, because the beings who flew that ship supposedly came from a species that exists across something like 7 to 11 dimensions at once and is cursed, for all that cosmic sophistication, with a truly terrible sense of direction. So the reason your town is soaked in the impossible might, in the end, come down to an interdimensional traveler taking a wrong turn tens of millions of years ago and burying his vehicle in what would become Oregon. The ship stayed, sunk into the rock, and Ford eventually found it, scavenged pieces of its technology, and used that alien material to build some of his machines, including, it is implied, the components that made the portal possible. So the deepest secret under the town is not magic in the fairy tale sense. It is a wreck, a very old, very large piece of somebody else's technology, lying in the dark under everyone's feet, slowly leaking strangeness into the world above it. And here the series does something I really admire, which is that it lets its own expert be uncertain. Ford, the man who knows more about Gravity Falls than anyone alive, does not actually know whether the buried ship is the cause of the town's weirdness or merely a symptom of it. He raises both possibilities and settles neither. Maybe the crash is what made the valley strange, or maybe the valley was already strange, already a soft spot in reality, and that strangeness is what pulled the ship down out of the sky in the first place, like a stone rolling into a dip in the ground. Ford does not know, and you are never told, for the whole run, which is a remarkable thing to leave unresolved at the very foundation of a world. The origin of everything is a shrug. The later book leans toward one answer. In the supplementary material, the suggestion is that the weirdness came first, that Gravity Falls was already a thin place, a spot where reality did not hold together properly, and that this is precisely why the crash happened there, the ship drawn in by the same strangeness it is often blamed for causing. But I want to be careful to keep our registers straight, because that is the book's answer, offered after the fact, and the episodes themselves never committed to it. Within the series, the honest state of knowledge is that the smartest man in the story looked at the wreck under his town and admitted he could not tell you which way the causation ran. And I think that uncertainty is not a flaw. I think it is the truest thing about how deep mysteries actually work, which is that when you finally dig down to the bottom of a thing, you often find not a clean answer but an older question. You find a buried ship, and you cannot even tell whether it is the cause or the consequence of the mystery you came down there to solve. Gravity Falls dug all the way to the bottom of its own world and put a question mark there on purpose. If the buried ship is the answer to why the town is weird, then the story of how the town was founded is the answer to a different and more human question, which is how a place hides what it is. And this is where Gravity Falls tells you, more or less openly, that the entire recorded history of the town is a lie, and that the lie was maintained by those with the deepest pockets and the strongest reasons to hide it. The official story is that the town was founded by a man named Nathaniel Northwest, ancestor of the richest and most powerful family around, a founding father honored with statues and a legacy the whole town takes for granted. It is not true. None of it is true. The real founder was a completely different man, and his story is so absurd that the powerful people running things decided it was better to erase him and invent a respectable lie in his place. The real founder was Quentin Tremblay, who the story insists, with a straight face, was a genuine president of the United States, specifically the 8.5th president, a man so catastrophically strange that the government scrubbed him from history entirely. The list of his reported behavior is a small comic masterpiece. He declared war on pancakes. He appointed a bench of babies to the Supreme Court. He issued a proclamation about pants that I will let you imagine. He was, by every account, a lunatic, and the establishment of the day found him so embarrassing that they wrote him out of the record and promoted the next man in line, crediting a different president to paper over the gap where Tremblay used to be. And when Tremblay, fleeing the people trying to erase him, ended up founding a town out west, that founding got stolen too, handed to the Northwest family, so the town could have a dignified origin instead of a ridiculous one. The way Dipper and Mabel find all this out is that Tremblay is not even dead. He preserved himself, decades and decades ago, by encasing his own body in peanut brittle, a substance he apparently believed, wrongly but enthusiastically, would keep him alive, and against all reason, it more or less worked, and the children crack him out of his brittle shell, and he simply resumes talking, as though no time has passed. It is one of the silliest inventions in the show, and I do not want to oversell the depth of a gag about a president in a candy cocoon. But underneath the joke is the same idea the series keeps returning to, the one that is really the spine of this entire video, that the normal, official, agreed-upon version of the world is a cover story, and the truth has been buried, erased, brittle-wrapped, and hidden in a cave, not because it is dangerous exactly, but because it is inconvenient to the people whose power depends on the lie. The Northwests are the human face of that idea, and the writing is quietly savage about them. Their whole status, their mansion, their contempt for the townspeople they consider beneath them, all of it rests on a stolen founding, a fraud committed generations ago and maintained ever since. And what strikes me is how casually this gets dropped. There is no season built around exposing the Northwest fraud. It is handed to you in a single adventure, almost as a bit of color, and then the story moves on, trusting that if you are the kind of viewer who has been paying attention, you will notice that the richest family in town built its entire identity on erasing the truth, and that this is precisely how the real weirdness of the place stayed hidden for so long. The town does not forget its secrets by accident. It forgets them because forgetting is profitable, and someone is always in charge of the forgetting. And it turns out there was, literally, an organization in charge of the forgetting, which is one of the most unsettling reveals ever slipped into a mid-season episode. There is a secret society in Gravity Falls, hidden behind a false wall in an ordinary building in town, and its entire purpose is to erase people's memories. It is called the Society of the Blind Eye, and its members go out among the townsfolk, find anyone who has seen too much, anyone who has glimpsed a monster or a piece of the impossible, and they wipe it. They take the memory away with a device and they file it, and the person goes back to their life a little emptier and completely unaware that anything has been taken. That is why the town seems so calm about living on top of an anomaly. It is not that nothing weird happens to them. It is that they are not allowed to keep it. The device is the memory gun, and its origin is the saddest thing in this whole corner of the story, because it was not invented as a weapon of social control. It was invented by McGucket, Ford's old partner, to erase his own memories. McGucket had helped Ford build the portal, and in the course of that work he saw something, a glimpse through into the nightmare space on the other side, and what he saw broke him. He could not carry it. So he built a machine to reach into his own head and take the memory out, to give himself relief from a thing he could not unsee. And it worked, and the relief was real, and so he used it again, and here is the cruelty built into the device. Every time you use it, it takes a little more than you meant to give. Repeated use does not just erase the bad memory, it erodes the mind itself, wears grooves in a person, and McGucket used it so many times, trying so hard to forget, that he erased himself into the babbling, broken old man the town knows as its local lunatic. The wild-eyed hermit everyone laughs at is a genius who tried to delete his own pain and deleted most of himself along with it. There is a horrible logic to how it grew from there. McGucket founded the society, and what began as one man's attempt to escape his own trauma became a machine for erasing everyone's, an organization dedicated to keeping the whole town in a state of managed ignorance, taking away anything that might make people ask the wrong questions. And the memories are not destroyed, remember, they are stored, kept in little glass tubes in a hidden vault called the Hall of the Forgotten, an entire archive of everything the town was made to forget, sitting there in the dark, recoverable. Which means the truth of Gravity Falls is never actually gone. It is just filed away where nobody thinks to look, exactly like the ciphers in the credits, exactly like the founder in the peanut brittle, exactly like the demon in the woods. The same shape gets built at every scale, a truth that is hidden but never destroyed, waiting in a drawer for someone patient enough to open it. And I think this is the quiet horror underneath the whole sunny summer surface, the thing that gives the series its melancholy weight. It is a story about a town that has decided, at every level, from its founding fraud to its secret memory police, that it would rather not know. The adults have made their peace with the cover story. They have let the weird be walled off, brittle-wrapped, erased and archived, so they can live ordinary lives on top of an extraordinary and frightening truth. And into that town come two children who cannot stop looking, who find the journal, who pick at every seam, who refuse to let anything stay forgotten. That is the real engine of it all. A story about the people who insist on remembering, dropped into a place built entirely around the machinery of forgetting. There is another whole layer of the cosmology that most people underrate, and it is the one involving time. Because Gravity Falls quietly establishes that time travel is not only real in its universe but policed, and then it does something with that idea that is genuinely dark once you notice it. It starts as a lark. A time traveler shows up, a nervous, put-upon man named Blandon, whose time machine is disguised as a tape measure worn on his belt, the kind of thing you would never look at twice, and you pull the tab out to a certain length to set how far back or forward you want to go. He comes from an almost comically distant future, a year so far off that it renders on screen as a glitchy, unstable smear of digits, and he belongs to a bureaucratic outfit whose job is to run around fixing the little rips in time that careless people cause. Dipper and Mabel steal his tape measure, cause a great deal of chaos with it, and generally treat the whole thing as an adventure, which for a while it is. But the thread keeps developing, and it develops toward the idea of an entire authority that governs time, presided over by one of the strangest figures in the whole series, a giant infant called Time Baby, a colossal telepathic child who rules the future and commands a police force that enforces the laws of the timeline. There is a gladiatorial contest presided over by this enormous baby, where the prize is a wish that can reach back and change time itself. It is all played for comedy, big and absurd and silly, a huge glowing infant issuing decrees. And because it is played for comedy, you let your guard down. You file Time Baby under joke, a ridiculous cosmic bureaucrat who will presumably swoop in and set things right if things ever get truly bad. And then Weirdmageddon happens, and that setup gets cashed in with a brutality that still surprises me. When Bill breaks through and the apocalypse begins, Time Baby and the entire time police force actually do arrive, exactly as you hoped. The cavalry, the cosmic authority coming to enforce order on a demon who has broken every rule there is, and Bill destroys them instantly. Time Baby, the ruler of the future, the enforcer of all of time, is vaporized in a moment, wiped out before he can do a single thing, and the time police with him. The joke character you had filed away as the universe's safety net is annihilated in seconds, and the message could not be clearer. There is no adult coming to fix this. There is no higher authority that will step in. The one cosmic force you thought could overrule the villain turned out to be just another thing Bill could kill. The safety net was an illusion, torn away at the exact moment you were counting on it. And there is a genuinely chilling piece of causation buried in Blandon's story too, because he is not just comic relief, he becomes part of how the apocalypse happens at all. Blandon, bullied and mistreated by his own squad, resentful and desperate, made a deal, the way desperate people here always seem to make a deal, and the being he made it with was Bill, and he let Bill use his body. So the harmless little time traveler in the tape measure disguise ends up being one of the doors Bill walks through, one of the borrowed bodies the demon needed to reach into the world and set the end of everything in motion. The comic relief was a Trojan horse. That is such a Gravity Falls move, to take the silliest character in the cast, the one you laughed at, and reveal that he was secretly load-bearing in the tragedy the whole time. that the apocalypse partly rode into town on the belt of a man whose spaceship looked like a tape measure. Nothing here is only a joke. The jokes are just the places the knife gets hidden. Before the portal reveal, the first real villain was a child, and I think Gideon Gleeful gets overlooked in these conversations because he arrives so early and seems, at first, like a monster of the week you will never think about again. He is a little boy, a fake psychic who runs a tent show in town, all baby blue suit and enormous white pompadour, and a voice like syrup, and he presents himself as a beloved local celebrity with genuine supernatural gifts. And the interesting thing, the thing worth pulling out, is that his powers are partly real, but they are not his. Gideon's ability to move objects with his mind, to reach into a person and force their body to do what he wants, does not come from any gift he was born with. It comes from an amulet, a green stone he wears, and everything frightening he can do flows out of that object and nothing else. How he got the amulet is itself a little piece of the larger mystery, because Gideon obtained one of the journals, the second one, and used its knowledge to find the stone. So even the child villain is plugged into the central secret, the journals, the buried lore, the sense that all the power in this town traces back to the same hidden source. Gideon wanted the journals more than almost anything, because he understood, correctly, that whoever holds them holds the keys to everything, and his entire arc is driven by his hunger to collect all three and open whatever they promise. He is a small, grasping preview of the much larger appetite for these books that runs through the whole story. But the amulet is the part worth dwelling on, because something quietly moral is going on with it. The stone does not just grant power, it corrupts. Prolonged use works on the soul of the person wearing it, feeds the worst parts of them, deepens whatever cruelty and megalomania is already there. Gideon is a spoiled, angry, controlling child to begin with, and the amulet takes those qualities and amplifies them, makes his need to dominate everyone around him worse and worse the longer he leans on the stone. The power and the corruption are the same current, and the flip side of that, the thing that makes him ultimately beatable, is that once you take the amulet away, the threat collapses. Remove the object and Gideon is just a furious little boy again, powerful only in the ordinary, human way of a child who has been indulged too much and told no too little. His menace was never in him, it was in the thing he was holding. I think this matters because it is a rehearsal for the whole shape of how Gravity Falls thinks about power. Over and over, you are shown power that comes from outside a person and eats them from the inside. The amulet corrupts Gideon. The memory gun erodes McGucket. The deals with Bill hollow out everyone who takes them, Ford included. In this universe, the shortcut to power is almost always a trap, a thing that gives you what you want while slowly taking you apart. And the only power ever really trusted is the unglamorous, borrowed human kind, the kind that comes from other people, from a family holding hands in a circle, from a scrapbook rebuilding a mind, from a brother in the wrong clothes. Gideon is where that lesson first appears, in miniature, wrapped in a baby blue suit, and it is easy to laugh him off and miss that the show is already, this early, telling you exactly how it thinks the world works. Now for a conspiracy that reaches outside the series entirely, into a different show on a different channel for a different audience, and it is one of the liveliest for fans to argue about, precisely because nobody in charge has ever fully confirmed or fully denied it. The theory is that Gravity Falls shares a universe with Rick and Morty. On its face, this sounds like the kind of thing fans make up out of pure wishful thinking. Two shows about the strange and the multiversal. Wouldn't it be neat if? Except the creators themselves have been winking at it for years, and the winks are specific enough that people cannot let it go. There are crossover nods planted in both directions. Over in Rick and Morty, sharp-eyed viewers spotted jars in Rick's lab, the containers he keeps memories in, labeled with names, and among the names are ones that correspond to characters from Gravity Falls. A little hello, tucked into the background, exactly the kind of thing you would only catch if you were the sort of person who reads every label on every jar. And Gravity Falls has its own nods pointing back the other way, and the two creators have joked publicly about their shows existing in the same reality, have played along, have neither slammed the door nor thrown it open. This is such a clean example of the phenomenon we have been circling all night that I could not leave it out. The shared universe is not canon. Let me be plain about that, because it is exactly the sort of thing that gets repeated online until people start stating it as fact. There is no official declaration that these two shows occupy one continuity. What there is a pair of creators who clearly enjoy each other's work, dropping Easter eggs into each other's backgrounds and refusing, with obvious delight, to ever settle the question. It is a wink held for years. And in a universe like this one, explicitly built on the idea of infinite dimensions and a multiverse Ford spent 30 years wandering through, the wink costs nothing and gives the fans everything. Because a multiverse is, by definition, a place where any two things could, in principle, be connected. The cosmology was built roomy enough to hold the joke, and then the joke was simply left sitting there, undenied, forever. This is worth pausing on as a piece of craft, because there is a real skill to leaving a thing exactly this open. A lesser show would either commit to the crossover, which would cheapen both stories, or explicitly rule it out, which would kill the fun. Gravity Falls, and Rick and Morty alongside it, found the third path, which is to make the connection deniable in both directions, to keep it in the register of a shared joke rather than a shared plot. And that register, the thing that is true enough to enjoy and unofficial enough to argue about, is really the native language of this entire fandom. So much of what people love lives in exactly that space, between confirmed and denied, the place where a creator planted something real and then stepped back and let the audience decide how much to believe. The Rick and Morty connection is not important to the plot of anything, but it is a lovely little demonstration of the whole relationship to certainty, which is that a mystery you can hold will always beat an answer you can put down. Some of the best secrets are not cosmic at all. They are tiny, personal, human things buried in plain sight and never made a fuss about. And my favorite of these is the matter of Dipper's name. Across the entire run, 40 episodes, you never learn Dipper's real first name. It is treated as a running secret, a thing he is embarrassed about and refuses to say, and there is a strange amount of discipline in never once slipping and letting it out over 2 seasons about a detail that seems so minor. Dipper is a nickname anyway, and you are told where it comes from, which is that he has a birthmark on his forehead in the shape of the Big Dipper constellation, the pattern of stars, and his real name is something he keeps hidden under his hat and his bangs, both the mark and the name he was given. The name itself, Mason, is confirmed in the supplementary material rather than in the episodes. So one of the most basic facts about the main character, what he is actually called, was deliberately withheld for the entire run and only released outside the show, in a book, the way so much else was released. And once you start pulling on the small facts, the whole cast turns out to be full of them. Dipper and Mabel are twins, 12 years old for almost the entire show, and the summer we watch is the summer they turn 13, which is the whole quiet clock ticking under the adventures. The reason there is always a faint sadness to it, because the summer is not just a summer, it is the last edge of childhood, and they are going to be teenagers by the time it ends. Mabel is the older twin, by a matter of minutes, which is exactly the kind of detail that means nothing mechanically and everything emotionally, because so much of her story is about feeling responsible for holding their childhood together, for keeping the two of them from drifting apart, the way growing up threatens to make them drift. The precise birth year that gets passed around online is really just arithmetic done backwards from their ages and the year the story is set, so I would hold that particular number loosely, but the ages themselves, 12 turning 13, are firm, and they are the heartbeat of the whole thing. What I love about these small buried facts is how they rhyme with the big ones. A name gets hidden the way a demon gets hidden. Dipper's real name is withheld, with the same instinct that withheld the author's identity, the same instinct that redacted the signature on the journal pages, the same instinct that put Stan's secret in a locked basement and Bill's return in a backwards whisper. Withholding is not a plot device here, it is a personality, a consistent way of being that runs from the largest mystery down to the smallest, and it means that watching is a continuous act of leaning in. Even the throwaway character details are held back a beat, offered obliquely, left for you to notice or not. And when you add it all up, the ciphers and the redacted name and the 6 fingers and the peanut brittle president and the jars in another show's laboratory, you start to understand that the density of secrets is not a gimmick layered on top. It is the texture of the thing itself. It is what Gravity Falls is made of. There is no version of it with the secrets stripped out, because the secrets are load-bearing all the way down to the studs. And I think that is why it rewards this kind of attention so richly, why people are still making videos about it a decade later, still decoding, still arguing about the salamander god and the triangle in the woods. A show that hides one big secret gives you one good night of discovery, A show that hides 1,000 secrets, at every scale, in the credits and the backgrounds and the character names and the sound design played backwards, gives you a place you can keep returning to for years and never quite empty out. Gravity Falls made itself inexhaustible on purpose. It is a summer you can keep unpacking long after the summer. Inside the story is over. The clearest proof that Gravity Falls meant to be inexhaustible is that it did not actually end when the last episode aired. The journals, those cursed books that drive the whole plot, exist in the real world now. After the finale, a physical copy of the third journal was published. The actual book, hundreds of pages, in Ford's handwriting, full of his sketches and his notes and his marginalia, the same object the children spend the series decoding, made real and put in readers' hands. And it is not just a souvenir. It is loaded in exactly the way you would expect from these people. It contains information the episodes never had time to include. Deeper lore, more creatures, more of Ford's story, more hidden codes to solve, so that buying the book was less like buying merchandise and more like being handed the next stage of the puzzle. Then they did something with the physical book so perfectly in the spirit of the whole enterprise that it still makes me grin. There was a special edition of the third journal released later, sometimes called the Blacklight Edition, and it contained additional hidden messages, invisible ink, text you literally could not see under ordinary light, and had to reveal with an ultraviolet lamp. The book had secrets inside the secrets, a layer beneath the layer you already paid for, readable only if you were willing to go a step further and shine the right kind of light on the page. That is the credits cryptogram all over again, the same instinct scaled up into a physical object. Reward the person who does not stop at the surface. And there is, in the deeper lore around these books, the idea that certain warnings only fully resolve when all three journals are brought together, that the complete picture requires the complete set, which is, of course, the exact thing Ford begged Stan never to do. The books reward you for assembling the very thing the story warns you never to assemble. Even the merchandise is in on the tragedy. So the canon kept growing after the last episode aired. And this raises a genuinely interesting question that fans argue about with real heat, which is how much of the later material actually counts. When the show was on the air, there were things it left open, mysteries it never resolved on screen, and for years those open questions belonged to the fans, who filled them with theory. Then the books started answering them. The origin of Bill, the nature of the buried ship, the true depth of Ford and Bill's relationship, the villain's ultimate fate, all of these got firmer answers in print than they ever had in the episodes. And some fans love that, love finally knowing, and some feel the answering took something away, that a mystery is more powerful while it is still a mystery, and that a show whose whole genius was leaving things beautifully unresolved maybe should have let some of them stay unresolved. I do not think there is a right answer to that, but it is worth naming, because it is the natural endpoint of everything we have talked about tonight. When you build a show that trains people to hunt for hidden answers, you create an appetite the show itself can never fully satisfy, and eventually somebody has to decide whether to keep feeding it or to let it stay hungry. So far, the choice has mostly been to keep feeding it, one book at a time, and the hunger, remarkably, has not gone away. The strangest and newest of these books deserves its own place in the conversation, because it did something no other piece of the canon had done, which is that it handed the pen to the villain. In 2024, years after the finale, a book arrived that is framed as being written by Bill Cipher himself. Not a book about Bill, a book by Bill, in his voice, from his point of view, his account of his own trillion-year existence, his origin, his schemes, his obsessions, his side of everything. And the framing device is the detail that ties it back to the finale so neatly it almost hurts. The book is presented as something Bill produced after the events of the show, during what is described as therapeutic arts and crafts, at the Theraprism, the cosmic asylum where the axolotl sent him. So the whole book is in effect the journal of an imprisoned demon in therapy, a monster made to reflect on his life, writing it all down as part of his rehabilitation. Which means it confirms, just by existing, the thing the finale only hinted at in a backwards whisper. Bill survived. Here he is, writing. And this is where you have to hold two ideas at once, because a book narrated by Bill Cipher is a genuinely tricky document, and years of the show have taught you exactly why. Remember the rule: Bill does not lie, but he deceives, constantly, through selection and omission, and technically true statements arranged to mislead. So a memoir written by Bill is not a reliable history, it is a performance. Everything in it might be technically accurate and still shaped to make you feel the way Bill wants you to feel, to make him sympathetic, or frightening, or misunderstood, whatever serves him. The book answers a great many of the old open questions: the destruction of his home dimension, the true nature of his bond with Ford, his real motivations, and every one of those answers arrives through the mouth of the least trustworthy narrator in the entire franchise. So even as it fills in the blanks, it reopens them, because you can never quite be sure how much of what the triangle tells you is the truth, and how much is the truth bent into a shape that flatters him. Here is a way to answer your mysteries while keeping them mysterious, by letting the answers come from a creature who cannot be trusted even when he is not, strictly speaking, lying. What the book does confirm, and confirm with real weight, is the emotional core we talked about earlier, the depth of what happened between Bill and Ford, the sun in my galaxy language, the sense that the central relationship of the backstory was far more intimate and far more wounded than a simple villain and his victim. It confirms that Bill's home dimension was destroyed by a monster, and then reveals, in the way it tells the story, that the monster was Bill. It fills in the geography of his prison, the dimension he is held in, the shape of his punishment, and it confirms the intended arc, the one the axolotl set in motion, rehabilitation pointing toward eventual reincarnation as some lesser form of life, the demon slowly, unwillingly, being remade into something smaller and humbler. So the book gives you an ending for Bill, of a sort. But it is an ending shaped like a beginning, because rehabilitation is not death and reincarnation is not oblivion, and the creature narrating the whole thing is precisely the sort who would tell you he has changed while planning his return in the same breath. The last word in that backwards whisper was return, and a book written by Bill, in Bill's voice, is not the kind of document that lets you stop wondering whether he meant it. I have been talking all night as though Gravity Falls were a single intelligence, planting secrets and refusing to deny them. And it is worth pulling back the curtain a little, because behind almost all of it is one person, and knowing that changes how you hear the whole thing. It was created by Alex Hirsch, and Hirsch did not just create it. He voiced an enormous amount of it. The gruff old con man Grunkle Stan is him. The sweet, slow, lovable handyman Seuss is him. The babbling old hermit McGucket is him. And the villain, the yellow triangle with the game show voice, Bill Cipher, is him too. So a huge amount of the emotional range of this show, the warmth of Stan and the gentleness of Seuss and the tragedy of McGucket and the menace of Bill, all of it is coming out of the same throat. The man who hid the codes in the credits is also, quite literally, the voice telling you reality is an illusion. There is something almost fitting about that. The architect of all these secrets standing behind the curtain doing the voices himself, playing both the family you trust and the demon you should not. And the way Hirsch chose to end things tells you as much about his intentions as anything in the episodes. Gravity Falls was not cancelled. It did not run out of steam or get axed by a network that stopped believing in it. Hirsch decided, deliberately, that the story he wanted to tell was one with an ending, a single summer, a finite thing, and that stretching it out indefinitely would betray what it was about. He announced that the second season would be the last, and he brought it to the conclusion he had been building toward. And then he stopped, at 2 seasons, at 40 episodes, while it was still beloved and still had an audience, and could easily have continued for years. That is a rare and difficult thing to do in television, to end a successful show on purpose, at its peak, because the story is finished, and it is completely consistent with everything else about it, because a show about a summer that has to end could not itself go on forever without becoming a lie. The finitude was the meaning. The clock running out was never a limitation it suffered under, it was the subject. There was even a kind of farewell built into the ending of the run, a special that aired a week before the finale, a behind-the-scenes retrospective hosted, in a lovely touch, by Hirsch himself, alongside the giant Time Baby, walking through the characters and the villains and the hidden secrets, one last time before the last episode arrived. It was the creator stepping out from behind the curtain on purpose, acknowledging the game he had been playing with the audience for 4 years, tipping his hat to the people who had been decoding and theorizing and hunting all that time, right before he gave them the ending. And I think that gesture, a creator who spent years hiding things, pausing at the very end to celebrate the people who found them, is the warmest possible note to end a mystery on. It says the secrets were never meant to keep you out. They were meant to bring you closer, to make you an active participant, to turn watching into searching, and searching into a kind of belonging. The whole architecture of hidden codes and undenied conspiracies was, underneath everything, an invitation. Come closer, look harder, there is more here than they told you, and it was put here for you to find. For all that the finale wraps up its central conflict, it is worth being honest about how much it deliberately leaves unresolved, because the ending is not the clean, everything back to normal reset you might remember it as. When Bill is destroyed and the town is restored, the restoration is not total. There are pockets of the weirdness that never get cleaned up. On one farm at the edge of town, some of Bill's flying eye creatures are still hanging around afterward, going about their business as though the apocalypse were just a season that came and went. The dead that were raised are quietly reburied. The town settles back into its version of normal, but the normal is patched, imperfect, a little haunted at the corners, and you are shown that on purpose. There is no pretending the weirdness is gone. It is simply back to being managed, back to being the thing that lives under the surface, exactly as it was before the children ever arrived. The cover-up resumes, the town goes back to forgetting, and the very last thing the two old men do, once it is all over, is get in a boat and go looking for more of it. Stan and Ford, reconciled at last after a lifetime of estrangement, do not settle down into a quiet retirement. They restore the childhood dream, the boat they were going to sail as boys, and they set off together to hunt anomalies, to chase the strange and the impossible across the whole world. Because the whole world, we are being told, is full of it. Gravity Falls was never the only weird place. It was one soft spot among many, and out past the town line there are more mysteries than two men could catalog in the years they have left, and they are going to spend those years chasing them side by side. That is an ending that closes the family's story and flings the universe's story wide open in the same gesture. The wound between the brothers heals, and the door to 1,000 new mysteries swings open, and both things happen in the same shot of a little boat heading out to sea. So it ends the way it lived, with a resolution that is also an opening, an answer that is also an invitation. The children go home to California, their summer over, 13 years old now, carrying everything the summer gave them. The mystery shack passes to Seuss, who loves it exactly as much as it needs to be loved, and the two old men sail off toward a horizon full of undiscovered weirdness. Nothing is truly finished. The eye creatures are still on the farm, the demon is still in the woods, going green. The salamander god is still out there beyond space, holding a poem about a return, and the whole world is still, quietly, soaked in the impossible, waiting for anyone patient enough and brave enough to go looking. Gravity Falls did not end by tying every thread. It ended by showing you that the threads go on forever, past the town line, past the last episode, past the edge of the frame, and then it trusted you to keep pulling on them yourself, which, judging by the fact that we are here tonight, a decade later, still talking about a triangle in an Oregon forest, is exactly what happened. There is a bigger conspiracy underneath all the smaller ones, and I have saved it for near the end because it is the one that took me the longest to see, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and it changes what the whole thing is. All of this machinery, the ciphers, the demon, the portal, the buried ship, the secret societies, the time police, the founding fraud, all of it is scaffolding around a single, ordinary, devastating subject, which is that childhood ends. That is the mystery it is really about. Everything else is a container for that. The reason the summer matters so much, the reason there is always a low ache under even the funniest episodes, is that Dipper and Mabel are 12, and the summer we are watching is the last one before they become teenagers, and they can feel it coming, that when this summer ends, something is going to close that never opens again. You can see this admitted most directly in the way the finale is structured, because the last real threat is not the apocalypse. The apocalypse is defeated with an episode to spare. The last real threat is the birthday. The twins turn 13 at the end, and there is an ordinary, quiet, terrible fear running through the final stretch that has nothing to do with a triangle. The fear that growing up will pull the two of them apart, that Dipper will move on and Mabel will be left behind, that the closeness they have had their whole lives cannot survive becoming adults. That is the real reason the fantasy bubble was such an effective trap, because it offered Mabel the one thing the whole story is grieving, a summer that never ends, a childhood you never have to leave. The demon understood, correctly, that the thing these children fear most is not death, it is time. and a villain who traffics in the deepest fear of his victims reached past the monsters and the apocalypse and found, at the bottom of a 12-year-old girl, the ordinary human terror of having to grow up. I think this is why Gravity Falls hits people the way it does, why grown adults get unexpectedly emotional about a cartoon that was, on paper, a monster of the week comedy for children, because the mystery box turned out to be a music box. All that elaborate architecture of secrets was built around a very small and very universal ache, the ache of a summer ending, of a childhood you can feel slipping even as you are still inside it, of the specific golden light of being young with the people you love and knowing, somewhere underneath, that it will not last. Nobody ever denied that either. The melancholy was left to sit right there in the open, in the amber of the opening credits, in the ache of the theme song, in the way the last episodes slow down and let the family just be together before it all has to end. The codes were the game, the grief was the point, and you were trusted, exactly the way you were trusted to decode the credits, to feel the sadness underneath without ever needing it spelled out. Something else happened because of all this that I do not think anyone fully planned, which is that Gravity Falls changed the people who watched it. When a show spends 4 years teaching an audience that every frame is loaded, that the credits are always a message, that the background is never just the background, it does not only tell those people a story, it trains them, it builds a habit of attention. An entire generation of young viewers came out of it unable to watch anything the same way again, permanently converted into the kind of people who pause on a frame to read the sign on the wall, who run the audio backwards on instinct, who assume that if a detail is there, someone put it there on purpose and it can be decoded. That is a strange and rather beautiful thing for a children's cartoon to do to a person. It did not just entertain a generation, it taught them to read. You can see the fingerprints of it all over the culture that came after. The obsessive frame-by-frame analysis, the theory videos, the collective decoding of a show as it airs, the assumption that a good mystery is a puzzle to be solved together by a community rather than a story to be received alone. All of that is more normal now than it was before, and Gravity Falls is one of the places it was forged. It did not invent the alternate reality game or the hidden cipher. Those are older than any of us. But it took that whole tradition, the treasure hunt, the buried code, the community solving a thing together, and it aimed it at children, at a mass audience, on a major network, and committed to it with a seriousness nobody expected from an afternoon cartoon. It treated its young audience as capable of real difficulty, real patience, real cryptography, and the audience rose to meet it, every single time, faster than the creator expected, all the way out to a statue in a forest. And I keep coming back to how much respect that represents, because that is really the difference between the good version of this and the bad version. And there is a bad version. There are plenty of shows that withhold and tease and pile up mysteries, that dangle secrets they have no intention of honoring, that mistake confusion for depth, and use the appearance of hidden meaning as a substitute for actually having any. Gravity Falls was the opposite of that. Its secrets were real, its codes always decoded to something, its clues always pointed at answers. When it hit a thing, the thing was there, findable, solid, waiting. The withholding was never contempt. It was an enormous, sustained act of faith in the audience. A bet that if you made the puzzle real, and hard, and honest, people would love you more for making them work than they ever would for handing it over. And the bet paid off so completely that we are here, tonight, years later, still turning the pieces over, still finding new light to shine on old pages. That is not the legacy of a show that fooled its audience. That is the legacy of a show that believed in them. Let me go back, before we close, to one episode that shows the whole machine working at once, because it is the clearest picture of how Bill actually operated inside the story, and it ties the mystery layer and the demon layer together in a single, unsettling package. Somewhere in the second season, Dipper is deep into his investigation of the author. He has recovered that locked laptop from the bunker, the one that told him the name began with an F, and he is desperate to get into it, because he is certain the machine holds the answer to the whole mystery. He is stuck on the password. He is exhausted, obsessed, staying up night after night, and this is exactly the state a person has to be in for Bill to find a way in, because Bill preys on desperation. On the moment you want a thing so badly, you will make a deal for it. And so Bill comes to Dipper in a dream and offers him help. And the price, the way Bill's prices always are, seems trivial at the moment it is offered, and turns out to be enormous. Bill asks only to borrow a puppet, a little thing, nothing. And Dipper, thinking of his sister's puppet show and not thinking nearly hard enough, agrees. What he has actually agreed to is to let Bill into his body. The demon takes possession of Dipper, walks around in him, and the fandom named this version of the character Bipper, Bill wearing Dipper like a coat, and it is horrible to watch, because you see a child's body inhabited by something that is not a child, moving wrong, grinning wrong, treating the body it has borrowed with a careless cruelty, injuring it, because it is not Bill's body, and Bill does not care what happens to it. And what does he do with this hard-won access? He goes for the laptop. He is trying to destroy Dipper's investigation into the author, because the author, and the portal, and the whole secret under the town are Bill's business, and the last thing he wants is a curious 12-year-old getting to the bottom of it. In the end, Bill smashes the laptop, wrecks it, to keep its secrets buried. I love this episode as a demonstration piece because it puts everything in one room. You have the central mystery, the author, the thing the whole show is built around. You have the physical clue, the locked machine, the password, the tantalizing sense of an answer just out of reach. And you have Bill, arriving exactly when the mystery is hottest, to protect the secret by any means necessary, which tells you, if you were paying attention, that Bill has a stake in the author mystery, that these two threads you thought were separate, the demon and the missing scientist, are actually the same thread, and have been all along. That connection got handed to you in the middle of a comedic episode about a puppet show, wrapped in slapstick, and you were trusted to notice that a demon does not go to that much trouble to bury a secret unless the secret is about him. It was another code, really. Not letters this time, but plot. A piece of the mystery hidden inside a joke, decodable by anyone patient enough to ask why the villain cared so much about a broken laptop. We have used the phrase, never bothered to deny all night, and I want to end on what it actually means, because it is more than a catchy way to describe a bunch of open mysteries. There are only 3 things a storyteller can do with a secret. You can confirm it, say yes, this is true, here is the answer. You can deny it, say no, that theory is wrong, put it out of your mind. Or you can do the third thing, the hardest and the rarest thing, which is to leave it, to plant something real, and then step back and refuse to close the question either way, to let it live in the space between confirmed and denied, where the audience has to hold it themselves. Gravity Falls, over and over, chose the third thing. It confirmed less than you think and denied almost nothing, and it built its whole relationship with its audience out of that refusal. And I have come to think that refusal is a form of generosity, though it does not always feel like one. It is easy to read an unanswered mystery as a withholding, as the storyteller keeping something from you. But there is another way to see it, which is that an answer is a kind of ending. The moment a thing is confirmed, it stops being yours. It becomes a fact you receive rather than a question you live inside. When the causation of the buried ship is left unsettled, when Bill's fate hangs on a backwards whisper, when the shared universe stays a wink and never a ruling, those answers are not being hoarded. You are being handed the more valuable thing, which is the open question, the version of the mystery that stays alive, because nobody in authority ever came along and killed it with a verdict. The creator has said as much about Bill, has called the openness a deliberate thread, left for the fans to keep pulling. That is not laziness, and it is not a cheat. That is a storyteller understanding that the most durable gift you can give an audience is a question good enough to keep. This is also why the 3 registers we have been careful about all night matter so much for a story like this one. There is what it confirms, the things that demonstrably happen, and those you can state plainly. There is what it implies, the readings and the arguments about meaning, and those you have to mark as readings, because they are yours and mine and not the story's. And there is what is left open, the theories and the maybes and the undenied, and those you must never dress up as fact, because the whole point of them is that they are not settled. The reason people get Gravity Falls wrong, the reason bad theory videos exist, is that they collapse those 3 registers into one. They take an implication and call it canon, they take a fan reading and call it confirmed, they take a maybe and narrate it as a thing that happened. And it deserves better than that, because it was so scrupulous about the difference. It always told you the truth, it just did not always tell you the answer. And keeping those 2 things separate, the truth and the answer, is the whole discipline of loving a mystery honestly. So when I say the writers never bothered to deny their conspiracies, I do not mean they were careless. I mean they were confident. A show that denies things is a show that is worried about being misunderstood, that wants to control what you believe. This one was never worried. It planted its secrets in the credits and the backgrounds and the character names and the woods of Oregon, and then simply trusted that the right people would find them and the rest would enjoy the ride. And either way, it did not need to stand at the door explaining itself. That confidence is rare, and it is why the show has aged the way it has, why it feels less like a product that was delivered to you and more like a place that is still there, still holding its secrets, still waiting. It did not need to deny anything, because it was never trying to win an argument. It was trying to build a mystery you could live in for the rest of your life, and it did. There is one last thing worth saying about how it got away with all this openness, and it is a little counterintuitive, because you would think a series this loose about its answers would be loose about everything. It is not. Underneath all the deliberate ambiguity, Gravity Falls is astonishingly strict about its rules, and I have come to believe that the strictness is exactly what earned it the right to be open. The big questions could be left hanging precisely because the machinery underneath the questions never wobbled. The physics were locked, even when the plot was not. Think about how consistent the rules actually are. A demon who cannot tell a flat lie, and who never once, across 40 episodes, is caught telling one, because the writers held to it. A deal with that demon that truly cannot be broken, so that when the family needs to beat him they cannot cheat their way out. They have to find something more binding than his bargain, and they do, in a god whose counter-deal is even more airtight. An apocalypse that cannot cross the town line, and does not, no matter how badly the villain wants it to. A memory weapon that erases recollection but never the self underneath, established in one episode and then paid off seasons later, when a man rebuilds his own erased mind from a scrapbook, because the rule said that was possible. A weapon of power that corrupts its user, shown early with a child and an amulet, and honored all the way through. The laws were set down carefully and then obeyed, even when obeying them made the story harder to tell, and especially when obeying them made the story hurt. And that is the trick, that is the whole thing. You can only leave a mystery open and have the audience trust you if the audience knows the world has rules, because rules are what make a mystery solvable in principle, even when it is unsolved in practice. If anything can happen, then a mystery is just noise, and withholding the answer is just cruelty. But if the world runs on laws you can learn, then an open question is an invitation to reason, a real puzzle with a real shape, and the audience will happily leave it unsolved, because they can feel that a solution exists. Gravity Falls spent 40 episodes proving its world was lawful, that its codes always decoded and its rules always held, and having earned that trust, it could afford to point at a statue in the woods and walk away without another word, because it had taught you that when this story leaves something standing in the frame, it is there for a reason, and the reason is real, even when it declines to say it out loud. The openness was never the opposite of rigor. The openness was what the rigor paid for. So the conspiracies that got left undenied are not loose ends. That is the thing I most want you to take from tonight. They are the deliberate, load-bearing, carefully constructed spaces left open on purpose, built on top of a foundation so solid that leaving them open was safe. The salamander god beyond space. The demon in therapy who wrote his last word as return. The buried ship that might be the cause or the symptom. The wink between two shows that neither creator will settle. The statue going green in an Oregon forest. Every one of them is a door opened and left ajar, standing in a house whose every other wall is sound, and the draft that comes through those doors is the reason the place still feels alive a decade after the lights went out. I promised earlier that we would come back to the demon's nihilism, and this is the place to do it, because there is a quiet theology buried at the top of this cosmology that most people never quite assemble, and once you assemble it, it changes the meaning of everything Bill spends the series shouting at you. Remember his whole philosophy, the thing he says with that game show grin, that reality is an illusion, that the universe is a hologram, that nothing matters, buy gold, goodbye. That is his gospel. He preaches it constantly, to Ford, to the twins, to the whole town, the gospel of a creature who insists that meaning is a joke, and rules are for suckers, and there is nothing above any of us but chaos. And for most of the run, there is no one on screen big enough to contradict him, no higher power, no authority he respects, which makes his nihilism feel, for a while, like it might just be the truth of the world he is set in. And then, right at the very end, at the exact moment of his destruction, we learn that there is something above him after all. Because as Bill comes apart, he does not curse the twins or rage at Stan. He calls out that name, backwards and desperate, to the axolotl. And the axolotl, we piece together through the deeper lore and then through the later book, is a god, an entity that exists outside of space and time, older and larger than Bill, a power the trillion-year-old demon apparently knows to beg when everything else has failed. It is named, and this is the detail I keep turning over, after the salamander, the small amphibian famous for regrowing the parts of itself that are lost, a living emblem of the thing that does not stay broken. So the highest power this world ever gestures toward is not a god of destruction or judgment, it is a god of rebirth. And the demon who spent the whole series preaching that nothing matters spends his last conscious moment appealing to it for another chance. Now I have to keep our registers honest here, because a great deal of the axolotl is left to poem and implication rather than hard-on-screen fact, and you are given only fragments, an incantation, a name, a backwards prayer. But the shape of the thing is unmistakable, and the reading it invites is this. Bill's nihilism was never the truth of the universe. It was the story a wounded creature told himself so he would not have to feel the weight of what he had done. And the proof is in his own final act, because a being who truly believed that nothing matters would not, in his last instant, cry out to a god of second chances asking to return. You do not beg for more of a thing you believe is meaningless. The plea gives him away. Underneath the trillion years of grinning contempt was a creature who wanted, more than anything, to be spared, to be remade, to matter enough to be worth saving. And the strange, merciful, almost unbearable thing that happens is that he is allowed to be. The god of rebirth answers. Bill is not annihilated. He is taken and held and set on the long road toward becoming something smaller and humbler and new. The universe he swore was empty turned out to have something at the top of it that decided he was worth not throwing away. That is a staggering thing to put at the summit of a children's cartoon, and it is done almost entirely in whispers, in a name and a poem and a reversed scream, trusting you, as ever, to gather the pieces and see the shape. The deadliest being in the story loses, and the response to his defeat is not triumph but a kind of terrible grace. And it means that the deepest secret that got left undenied is not about a code or a portal or a buried ship at all. It is that the whole nihilistic surface of the villain was a lie he told himself, and the universe underneath it, the real one, the one with a salamander god at the top, was on the side, all along, of things coming back. So here we are at the end of it, and it is worth stepping back to think about what this strange little show actually turned out to be. Gravity Falls ran for only 2 summers on television, 40 episodes and change, a modest run by any measure, a cartoon that aired in the afternoons for children, and it has outlasted almost everything that aired alongside it. People are still decoding it, they are still writing about it, arguing about the triangle in the woods, buying the books, shining ultraviolet light on hidden pages, finding new things in frames they have watched 100 times. It became one of those rare works that is bigger on the inside than the outside, a show that looked like a summer adventure comedy and turned out to be a cathedral of secrets built around a very small and very human sadness about growing up. It taught a whole generation to read the world as if everything in it might mean something, and then it gave them a world where everything did. And I think the reason it endures, the reason it is not just remembered but still actively loved, is that it never talked down to anyone. It trusted children to solve real ciphers and to feel real grief. It trusted its audience to sit with an unanswered question and not feel cheated. It hid its heart under a mountain of codes and puzzles and jokes, and it trusted you to dig for it, and the digging is what made you love it. Because a thing you found yourself belongs to you in a way a thing you were handed never does. The conspiracies it left undenied were not a marketing trick or a loose thread dropped by accident. They were its way of staying with you, of making sure that when the last episode ended and the family sailed away and the children took the bus home, there would still be something out there in the woods, going green in the rain, waiting for you to come back and wonder about it again. And you do. That is the whole magic of it. You always do. Take that with you tonight as you drift off. Somewhere there is a summer that does not have to end.